Well, good afternoon, North Point students. Welcome to another week of cabin fever relief. Just know that I am really excited to be with you this afternoon because today is Easter. So happy Easter. I hope that you guys have had a great time already today. I know that things have looked a little different in the life of our church and even in the life of your family. But just know that our celebration of Jesus' resurrection has not changed, and that the fact that he has come back and he offers salvation is just as good as it was last year and every year before as it is this year. So with all that being said, guys, with our week thought for this week, guys, we're back in Colossians once again. And before we turn back there to see some of the things that Paul is telling the Colossians, but also is extremely beneficial to us in our walk with Jesus. I just got one really important announcement that I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of. This Thursday night, so this Thursday, not next Thursday, this Thursday, which I believe is April the 16th, at 8 o'clock at night, catch that, 8 p.m., we are going to have a Zoom game night. So I know that we've had these live sessions on Instagram. We will pick those back up next week, but I want to give everybody an opportunity this week just to get together, play some games, hang out. We'll spend probably about an hour doing this, and we're doing it just a little bit later so that you guys have a chance to eat dinner. And then the following week, when we return with our Instagram lives, we will actually begin doing those at 8 o'clock in the evening, just so that you guys have time to eat with your families and do whatever else you need to do for the day with all the schoolwork. So, all that being said, those are the announcements for this week. I just want to make sure you guys knew what was going on. And so with that being said, let's look at Colossians. So, looking back to Colossians and Paul's letter to these believers, if you look at chapter 2 and you read verses 8 through 10, here's what Paul has to say. He says that they need to see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not, catch this, according to Christ. For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily, and you have been filled in him who is the head of all rule and authority. So, giving a little background here, Paul is writing to this Colossian church, and his big reason is the reason we talked about last week. There's heresy. And heresy is false teaching, things that people are telling about Jesus or other ways of salvation that completely just leave Jesus out completely, that creep into the church on occasion and have to be addressed. And that's exactly what Paul is doing here. And the heresy that has creeped into this church in Colossae is the idea that you need some kind of secret knowledge. You need some kind of works to really connect with Jesus, to really be saved. What's interesting is that Paul, again, remember, does not know, he's never met these believers, and he's writing them a letter anyway because he's so concerned about what's going on. But what I think is even more remarkable is that Paul really never gets into exactly what's going on. But I think we get a real clue in chapter 2 that while he doesn't get to the specific false teaching points as far as what's wrong about what they're teaching, he does get into the big idea of what's wrong with them. You see, the big idea is simply this. What they believe is more about human knowledge, things that you and I might be able to figure out on our own, or just plausible ideas about how things work between us, the universe, and God. And Paul says, that's not it. You know that's not it. And for those of you that do know that, great. For those of you who are beginning to get pulled aside with this heresy, let me just go ahead and correct it. This is not going to work. His point is simply this. Be careful what you believe. Be careful what you believe. And what that comes down to meaning, both for the Colossians and for us, is that we live in a world of ideas. They lived in the ancient Roman Empire. We live in the United States of America. Both pretty advanced for their times. The thing about it, as much information as they have, and even more so of the information and ideas that we have, the reality is that some of them a lot of them are not equal. There's a lot of ideas in the world, but not all ideas are created equal. You see, many ideas sound good. They might even sound like, that could actually work. But in reality, that's as far as it goes. And that's really what Paul is saying here. Some of these ideas are going to sound like, that I could see how that could work. And that's the thing about false teaching and heresy. I don't think you really understand it until you're a little bit tempted by it. But Paul says you don't need to be tempted. Paul says it's not going to be helpful to be tempted, because at the end of the day, it's all about Jesus, and it doesn't go any further than Jesus. So you need to be careful about what you think is even plausible, what's even possible, what might actually have some truth to it, because that's the best kind of lies. They always have a hint of truth. You see, just because an idea is practical doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it true. Think about when you see all these things on social media. I know a lot of you are on social media of varying types, but there's one thing that's common, I think, to each platform, and that is that we have people saying one thing but living another. We have some people presenting what is supposedly news and it's really fake news. We have other people that are doing these things where they're living their truth, but the reality of it is no matter how many things we see and how practical it might seem, that at the end of the day, they aren't all equal. They're not all true. So we need to be careful what we believe, especially when it comes to Jesus. So, in this letter to the Colossians, as Paul is talking about persevering in Christianity, part of that is going to have to be watching what we believe. Not because we can lose our salvation. That's never the discussion here. But one thing that I think Paul brings to the table that really speaks to today's situations is that following Jesus is something that can be fairly practical, especially in parts of the world like we live in, where following Jesus doesn't really cost very much. It's not going to cost you your job. It's not going to cost you any money. It's probably not going to cost you your life. The worst you can have is somebody that doesn't believe in God to just make fun of you. That's pretty much the worst of it. But even as practical as it might be to follow Jesus, just to have some sense of spirituality, right? We've got to be careful that we're not just following Jesus because it's practical. Because following Jesus is a total commitment. He loved us so much that he totally committed to being on the cross and rising from the dead. So, this Easter, guys, let's be careful what we believe. Let's watch what we believe, so that what we believe can reflect what it says here in the last verses of Psalm 33. It says, "Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you." Let's be people that hope in Jesus and watch what we believe. Don't forget, this Thursday night, coming up this week on the 16th at 8 o'clock, we will have our Zoom game night. Your parents need to check their email for information on how to get on that. And, yeah, guys, I love you. I miss you. And I will see you soon.